Admiral Zethkar had ruled the seventh sector of the Galactic Collective for over 4 centuries, and in all that time, nothing had challenged the absolute order of the universe. The crystalline spires of Station Omega stretched endlessly through the void, their surfaces gleaming with the soft blue light of contained antimatter. From his command throne, carved from a single piece of quantum-stabilized diamond, he could see the patrol routes of 10,000 vessels, each one a testament to the Collective's unquestioned dominance over the galaxy. The Collective had risen from the ashes of a dozen lesser civilizations, absorbing their knowledge, their technology, their very essence into a perfect harmony of progress. They had conquered death through consciousness transfer, mastered the fundamental forces of reality, and established a peace that had lasted for 3 millennia. Every sentient species in the galaxy had either joined willingly or been absorbed for the greater good. There were no wars anymore, no conflicts, no mysteries left unsolved. Or, so Zethkar believed, until the morning his reality shattered. The first sign of wrongness came from the Outer Rim monitoring stations. Sensor technician Vel Ohm materialized beside his throne in a shimmer of light, her normally composed features twisted with confusion and something that looked disturbingly like fear.
"Admiral," she began, her voice carrying harmonics of distress that hadn't been heard in the Collective for centuries, "we're receiving impossible readings from the Kepler frontier."
Zethkar's forearms gestured dismissively. His attention focused on the holographic displays showing trade routes and resource allocation.
"Define impossible."
Our instruments do not make errors. Sir, 3 hours ago, our deep space arrays detected a massive gravitational disturbance near the dead system of Sol 3.
The signatures suggest something emerged from what our physicists are calling a space fold, a method of faster-than-light travel that shouldn't be possible with current understanding of quantum mechanics.
The Admiral's attention sharpened.
In 3,000 years, the Collective had perfected portal technology, allowing instantaneous travel between fixed points. But folding space itself? That was theoretical at best, impossibly dangerous at worst. Show me the data. The air before him exploded into a 3-dimensional star chart, focusing on a small, unremarkable system at the very edge of collective space. Sol, Dub. 3 had been catalogued centuries ago. A dead world orbiting a yellow star, deemed unsuitable for colonization due to its primitive atmospheric composition and unstable geological activity. The system had been marked as a mining prospect and promptly forgotten. But now, the display showed something that made Zethkar's primary heart skip a beat. Energy readings that defied classification, mass signatures that shifted and flowed like living things, and at the center of it all, something that definitely hadn't been there before. "Magnify," he commanded. The image zoomed, enhanced, and resolved into something that should have been impossible, a ship. But not like any ship in the Collective's vast databases. Where their vessels were graceful curves of living metal and contained energy, this thing was angular, brutal, practical. It looked like it had been built for one purpose: war. The hull was a dark gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange markings covered its surface. Not the flowing script of the Collective, but harsh geometric patterns that hurt to look at. Most disturbing of all were the weapons. Massive, primitive-looking cannons jutted from its superstructure like the fangs of some ancient predator. It was crude, violent, and terrifyingly effective in its design. "Size estimates?" Zethkar asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. 12 kilometers long, sir. Mass approximately 50 million metric tons. And, Admiral, it's accelerating toward our outer colonies at a rate that should tear it apart. Zethkar stood, his forearms spreading in a gesture of authority that had silenced countless council meetings. Impossible. No known materials can withstand those stress factors. But even as he spoke, the displays updated. The alien vessel was moving faster now, its trajectory clearly aimed at the mining world of Kepler. 442b. More disturbing still were the secondary contacts appearing on sensors, smaller craft launching from hidden positions throughout the Sol system. Where the Collective had seen dead rock and empty space, something had been building, growing, preparing. "Admiral," Velom's voice cracked with harmonics of pure terror, "we're receiving a transmission." The command center fell silent. In 3 millennia, every intelligent species had been catalogued, absorbed, or eliminated. There was no one left to transmit to them. Put it through. The speakers crackled with static, then cleared to reveal a voice unlike anything in the Collective's databases. Where their own speech flowed in melodious harmonics designed to promote unity and calm,
This was harsh, guttural, carrying undertones of violence and determination that made the assembled technicians flinch.
This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Fleet, commanding the UES Retribution.
To any galactic collective forces currently in human space, you have exactly 24 hours to withdraw all personnel and assets from the Sol system and surrounding sectors. Any attempt to interfere with human colonial operations will be considered an act of war and responded to accordingly.
Silence stretched through the command center like a physical thing. Finally, Zethkar found his voice. Respond. Tell them they're in violation of collective space and must submit to integration protocols immediately. The communications officer, a young being with the rapid-fire neural patterns of the recently absorbed Zenith species, activated the response system. Unknown vessel, you are in violation of galactic collective territorial claims. This sector has been under our jurisdiction for 2,000 years. Submit to immediate boarding and prepare for integration into our civilization for the greater good of all sentient life. The response came back so fast it seemed instantaneous and carried harmonics that made several technicians physically recoil. Negative. This is human space and has been for the past 50 years. You will withdraw or we will withdraw you. You have 23 hours and 57 minutes to comply. Zethkar felt something he had never experienced in his 4 centuries of life, genuine uncertainty. The being on the other end of that transmission had spoken of war as if it were a normal, expected part of existence. The collective had eliminated warfare millennia ago through their integration protocols. Violence was inefficient, messy, counterproductive to the greater good. "Sir," came a voice from the tactical station. "Our xenobiology computers have finished analyzing the transmission patterns. The beings calling themselves humans appear to be carbon-based bipeds with unusual neural architecture. Their thought patterns show extreme individuality rather than collective harmony, and their stress responses seem to actually increase their cognitive performance rather than diminish it. Preposterous. No species can function without collective consciousness. They must be malfunctioning." But even as he spoke, more reports flooded in. The human vessel had launched what appeared to be reconnaissance drones. Small, fast craft that moved through space with an efficiency that put collective technology to shame. Worse, these scouts were already probing the defenses of Kepler 442b, mapping shield generators and weapon installations with disturbing precision. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "the miners on Kepler 442b are reporting unusual activity. Something about dark ships appearing in their system and scanning their facilities." Zethkar activated the colony's communication array directly, his image appearing on screens across the mining world. The face that appeared in response was that of mine supervisor Keth Lon, whose usual calm demeanor showed cracks of genuine worry. "Admiral, thank the collective you've made contact. We've been trying to reach you for hours. There are ships here, sir. Ships like nothing we've ever seen. They appeared out of nowhere and began scanning our facilities with some kind of energy beam that our shields can't block." "Are they attacking?" "No, sir, not yet. But, Admiral, they sent a landing party." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The collective had protocols for first contact, refined over millennia of successful integration. But those protocols assumed civilized beings who would recognize the superiority of collective consciousness and submit willingly to absorption.
Describe them. Keflon's image flickered as he accessed security recordings.
They're bipedal, as the computers indicated, but Admiral, they move like predators. Their coordination is unlike anything we've studied. They don't share consciousness, yet they function as a perfect unit. And their technology, the recording began to play, showing the mining facility's main entrance. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then the air itself seemed to tear apart, and figures began stepping through what could only be personal portal generators, technology the collective had deemed impossible for individual use. The humans were tall, lean creatures, encased in powered armor that moved with fluid grace. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that reflected light like mirrors, but their body language spoke of coiled violence barely held in check. They moved with the efficiency of born killers, covering ground with a purposefulness that made it clear they considered every being around them a potential threat. But what truly disturbed Zethkar was their behavior upon encountering the mining facility's staff. Rather than attacking or demanding immediate submission, they had simply talked. One of them, apparently the leader, had removed her helmet to reveal features that were alien yet somehow familiar. Bilateral symmetry, binocular vision, a mouth that could form expressions ranging from warmth to terrifying determination. "My name is Major Lisa Rodriguez, United Earth Marine Corps." The recording played, her voice carrying authority that needed no translation. "We're here to discuss the immediate evacuation of this facility. This system is now under human protection, and we cannot guarantee your safety if you remain." The most shocking part was what happened next. Instead of using force or superior technology to compel obedience, the humans had actually negotiated. They offered transport to collective space, compensation for lost equipment, even safe passage guarantees. It was civilization, but not as the collective understood it. "Sir," Kethlon continued, "they're not trying to integrate us. They're not trying to absorb our knowledge or add us to some collective consciousness. They just want us to leave. They claim this system belongs to something they call Earth, and that they're expanding their territory." Zevkar terminated the connection and turned to his tactical advisors. "Analysis. How many ships do our estimates suggest they possess?" The answer came back in harmonics of deep concern. "Based on the energy signatures and launch patterns we've detected, sir, we estimate at least 50 capital ships of unknown capability, plus support vessels numbering in the thousands. They appear to have constructed significant industrial infrastructure throughout the Sol system, including what looks like orbital shipyards and defensive platforms. In 50 years? The timeline was impossible. The collective required centuries to properly develop a system, even with their advanced technology and collective consciousness allowing perfect coordination. Sir, there's more. Our deep space monitors are detecting similar expansion in 17 other systems along our border. The humans haven't been hiding in Sol. 3, they've been building an empire." The command center erupted in chaos as reports flooded in from across the frontier, human ships appearing in system after system, always with the same message: withdraw from human space or face the consequences. Colony after colony reporting the same impossible encounters with beings who negotiated rather than integrated, who offered alternatives rather than demanding submission. Admiral Zethkar felt the foundations of his understanding crumble. For 3 millennia, the collective had believed they represented the pinnacle of evolution, the final stage of consciousness development. They had absorbed every species they encountered, adding their knowledge and capabilities to the greater whole. The very concept of a civilization that could match their technology while maintaining individual consciousness was theoretically impossible. "Admiral," came a voice from the strategic planning station, "the humans' deadline expires in 18 hours. Our analysis suggests they have the military capability to enforce their demands. What are your orders?" Zevkar looked out at the crystalline spires of his station, at the peaceful harmonics of a civilization that had forgotten what it meant to face an equal opponent. In the distance, his senses showed the approaching signature of the UES Retribution, a ship built for war by a species that had never forgotten how to fight. For the first time in 4 centuries, Admiral Zethkar faced a choice that the collective consciousness couldn't make for him. Submit to these impossible humans and abandon everything the collective had built in this sector, or call their bluff and discover whether beings who had mastered individual excellence could truly challenge the perfection of collective harmony. The countdown timer showed 17 hours and 37 minutes until the human deadline expired. Across the void, the UES Retribution continued its relentless approach, its weapons systems powered and ready, its crew preparing for a conflict that would determine whether the galaxy was big enough for 2 apex civilizations. In the depths of his diamond throne, Zethkar began to understand that the collective's 3,000-year reign of absolute certainty was about to face its first real test. And somewhere in the primitive depths of his consciousness, a part of him that had been dormant since before integration whispered a single, terrifying truth. They might not win. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the UES Retribution, watching the alien station grow larger through the reinforced transparent aluminum viewport. After 30 years of service in the Earth fleet, she had seen humanity's expansion from a single wounded world to an interstellar power, but this moment felt different. This was the first time they had encountered another galactic civilization, and everything humanity had built was about to be tested. Behind her, the ship hummed with barely contained energy. The Retribution was humanity's answer to the vast unknown of space. 12 kilometers of hardened steel, advanced ceramics, and weapons systems designed by a species that had learned warfare in the hardest school possible. Their own survival. Every system aboard had been tested in the crucible of human conflict and refined through decades of colonial expansion and defense. "Status report, Commander Park," she called to her executive officer, never taking her eyes off the alien station. Commander James Park materialized beside her, his augmented reality display casting soft blue light across his weathered features. All combat systems are green, Admiral. The fleet is in position, 12 heavy cruisers, 40 destroyers, and our support vessels are maintaining formation at the edge of the system. Marine strike teams are locked and loaded, and Colonel Mitchell reports his special operations teams are ready for immediate deployment. Sarah nodded, her fingers drumming against the viewport frame, a nervous habit she had never managed to break. What about our intelligence on their capabilities? Still analyzing, ma'am, but preliminary assessments are concerning. Their technology appears to be centuries ahead of ours in some areas. Their energy shields are unlike anything we've seen, and our xenobiology teams believe they may have achieved some form of collective consciousness. But Sarah could hear the unspoken qualifier in Park's voice. But their military thinking appears to be completely defensive. Our reconnaissance shows massive industrial capacity, incredibly advanced civilian infrastructure, but their weapon designs are purely for system defense. They've optimized for preventing others from taking what they have, not for taking what others have. Sarah turned from the viewport to face her second-in-command. Park had been with her since the Titan Rebellion, when humanity's outer colonies had nearly seceded over resource allocation disputes. He understood better than most what made humans dangerous. Not their technology or their numbers, but their absolute refusal to accept defeat when their survival was at stake. They're going to try to absorb us, she said, stating it as fact rather than speculation. The pattern fits every historical precedent we've found in their territory. They encounter a species, offer integration into their collective consciousness, and within a generation that species effectively ceases to exist as an independent entity. They've done it to at least 47 different civilizations over the past 3,000 years. And if we refuse? Park's expression grew grim. Based on the archaeological evidence from dead worlds in their territory, species that refused integration simply disappeared. Complete orbital bombardment, surfaces glassed, all traces of civilization erased. Sarah walked to the central holographic display, which showed the tactical situation in real time. The collective station was massive, larger than anything humanity had built, and their defensive fleet numbered in the hundreds. But those ships moved in perfect formation, their actions coordinated to a degree that suggested absolute unity of purpose. They don't understand us, she mused. 3,000 years of absorbing every species they meet, and they've never encountered anyone who said no and made it stick. Admiral, came a voice from the communication station. We're receiving another transmission from the alien station. Put it through. The holographic display shifted to show the alien commander they had been in contact with. Zefkar was an impressive figure, tall, graceful, with 4 arms that moved in complex patterns suggesting deep thought. His crystalline uniform seemed to be made of living light, and his features carried the serene confidence of absolute authority. Human Admiral, Zef began, his translated voice carrying harmonics of what their computers interpreted as confusion and growing concern. Your deadline approaches, yet you make no move to withdraw. Surely you understand the futility of resistance. The collective has brought peace and prosperity to 1,000,000 worlds. We offer you absorption into something greater than your individual selves. Sarah stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back in a gesture that every human in the fleet would recognize as preparation for battle. Admiral Zethkar, I'll be direct since your people seem to value efficiency. Humanity will not be absorbed, integrated, or otherwise consumed by your collective. We will maintain our independence, our individual consciousness, and our right to exist as we choose. But why? The alien's response carried harmonics of genuine confusion. Individual consciousness is chaos. It breeds conflict, inefficiency, suffering. We offer you perfection, unity of purpose, unlimited knowledge, immortality through consciousness transfer. Why choose the primitive struggle of separate existence? Sarah felt a cold smile cross her features. Because that primitive struggle made us who we are. Every war we've fought, every conflict we've survived, every time we've stared extinction in the face and refused to blink, that's what makes us human. You've spent 3,000 years eliminating that from every species you've encountered. We're here to tell you that stops now. You cannot seriously intend to fight the entire collective. Zefkar's image showed clear signs of agitation now, his forearms gesturing in patterns that the translation computers couldn't interpret. Our fleets number in the millions. Our technology has perfected matter manipulation at the quantum level. We have resources from 1,000 systems. And yet, Sarah replied, her voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who had made peace with necessary violence long ago, You've never fought anyone who fights back. Every species you've encountered either submitted willingly or was wiped out before they could mount effective resistance. You've forgotten how to fight a real war. She gestured to Commander Park, who activated a new display showing human expansion over the past 50 years. We've been watching you for decades, Admiral. Your scouts found Earth right after the Titan Rebellion, when our colonies were in chaos and our fleets were scattered. You marked us as primitives who would be easy to absorb when you got around to it. The display shifted to show human industrial capacity, orbital shipyards, asteroid mining operations, defensive platforms, and fleet dispositions across 18 systems. But while you were cataloging us as another species to eventually integrate, we were studying you, learning your patrol patterns, analyzing your technology, understanding your weaknesses. Zethkar's image flickered with what their computers interpreted as shock. Impossible. Our stealth technology is absolute. No species has ever detected our scout vessels. Sarah's smile widened. Admiral, humanity spent 10,000 years as persistence hunters. We tracked prey across continents using nothing but footprints and broken twigs. Did you really think we wouldn't notice ships the size of city blocks moving through our territory? Commander Park stepped forward, adding his own display to the conversation. We've been feeding your scouts carefully selected information for 20 years. Every secret installation they discovered, every hidden fleet disposition, every piece of intelligence they gathered was exactly what we wanted them to see. The alien commander's harmonics shifted into patterns the computers labeled as growing alarm. You're saying your entire civilization has been pretending to be primitive? Not pretending, Sarah corrected. We are primitive compared to your technology. Our ships are crude, our weapons are simple, our society is chaotic and inefficient. But Admiral, we're very, very good at being primitive. And sometimes, primitive wins. She activated another display, showing detailed scans of collective vessels and installations. Your ships are works of art, designed for perfect efficiency and harmonious operation, but they have critical structural weaknesses that any human engineer would spot immediately. Your weapons are incredibly powerful but depend on complex targeting systems that assume your opponents will behave rationally. Your defensive formations are flawless against conventional attack but leave you vulnerable to asymmetric warfare. This is impossible, Zethkar protested. No individual consciousness can process information fast enough to coordinate effective fleet actions. Your chaotic thought patterns would prevent any organized response. Sarah nodded toward the tactical display showing the human fleet ships that looked crude and dangerous compared to the elegant collective vessels, but which moved with the fluid precision of a predator pack. You're right that we can't think collectively. But we can think creatively. Every captain in my fleet has the authority to adapt, improvise, and overcome. When your perfect coordination meets our chaotic innovation, we'll see which approach proves superior. The communication channel carried several seconds of silence before Zethkar spoke again. Human Admiral, I offer you one final opportunity. Submit to integration, and your species will be preserved as part of the greater consciousness. Refuse, and you will be eliminated as a threat to galactic stability. Counteroffer, Admiral, Sarah replied. Withdraw from human space immediately and permanently. Recognize our sovereignty over the systems we've claimed, and never ever threaten human colonies again. Do this, and we'll be content to coexist peacefully in our respective territories. And if we refuse? Sarah's expression grew cold as winter on Luna. Then we'll show you what 3,000 years of individual struggle, innovation, and stubborn refusal to quit has created. You want to see chaos, Admiral? We invented chaos. You want to see inefficiency? We're so inefficient we somehow built an interstellar civilization in 50 years using technology you consider primitive. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a tone that carried absolute conviction. But most importantly, Admiral, you want to see what happens when a species that has never forgotten how to fight meets one that has never learned? You're about to get a very expensive education. The holographic display showed Zethkar's features cycling through expressions that the computers couldn't properly translate. Finally, he spoke, his harmonics carrying what sounded like genuine sadness. I am sorry, Human Admiral, but the collective cannot allow an aggressive, chaotic species to threaten galactic stability. You have forced us to choose elimination. Then we understand each other perfectly, Sarah replied. Commander Park, signal all ships. Condition red. All weapons free. Throughout the UES retribution, klaxons began to sound, not the harmonious tones that the collective used to coordinate their perfect society, but the harsh, urgent wails that humanity had perfected during millennia of warfare. In engineering sections, fusion reactors pushed past safety limits. In weapons bays, railgun batteries charged to full power.
In marine quarters, assault teams performed final equipment checks with the grim efficiency of soldiers who had never known peace. "Admiral," came a report from the sensor station. "Collective fleet is moving to intercept 147 vessels, led by what appears to be a Dreadnought-class command ship." Sarah nodded, watching the perfect formation of alien vessels begin their approach. They moved like dancers, each ship in precisely the right position, their formation optimized for mutual support and coordinated fire. It was beautiful, efficient, and predictable. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Execute Plan Omega. All ships, break formation and engage at will." What happened next would have horrified any collective tactician. The human fleet exploded outward in seemingly random directions, each ship choosing its own course and speed. Some accelerated directly toward the alien formation, others curved away at oblique angles, still others seemed to retreat entirely. To anyone schooled in proper military formation, it looked like complete chaos. But Sarah Chen smiled as she watched her captains implement the plan they had drilled for 20 years. Plan Omega wasn't about formation or coordination. It was about 37 individual commanders, each one a veteran of human conflicts, each one given complete freedom to use their ships however they thought best to achieve a single objective: prove that humanity would not go quietly into that good night. "Time to target?" she asked. 17 minutes until weapons range," Park replied. Sarah turned back to the viewport, watching the graceful alien ships approach with their perfect coordination and harmonious purpose. In 17 minutes, they would discover whether collective perfection could defeat individual excellence. In 17 minutes, the galaxy would learn whether humanity's chaos was stronger than the collective's order. In 17 minutes, the real war would begin. The first shots of the war were fired at exactly 1437 Standard Time, and they changed everything the Galactic Collective thought they knew about warfare. Admiral Zeth Kar watched from his command throne as the human vessels scattered across the battlefield in patterns that defied every principle of tactical coordination his species had learned over 3 millennia. The collective fleet maintained perfect formation, their crystalline hulls gleaming as they advanced in harmonious unity toward what appeared to be complete chaos. "Target the largest human vessel," he commanded, his forearms moving in the ritual gestures of battle command. "Concentrated fire will demonstrate our superiority and force their surrender." The collective dreadnought Eternal Harmony brought its primary weapons to bear, massive particle cannons that could theoretically crack a moon in half. Energy readings spiked across every sensor as the weapon charged, drawing power from the ship's quantum core. At this range, against primitive human shielding, the shot would vaporize their flagship and prove the futility of resistance. The particle beam lanced out, a column of coherent energy that should have ended the battle before it truly began. But something impossible happened. Instead of striking the human flagship, the beam scattered against what appeared to be empty space, dispersing harmlessly in a shower of electromagnetic noise. "Report," Zethkar demanded, his harmonics shifting into patterns of confusion. "Sir," came the response from the weapons station. "Our targeting computers show a direct hit, but our sensors indicate no damage to the human vessel. It's as if something deflected the beam at the last possible moment." On the tactical display, the answer became clear. The human ships weren't moving randomly. They were weaving between objects that didn't show up on collective sensors. Asteroids that had been moved into position, debris fields that masked their true locations, and most disturbing of all, some kind of stealth technology that created ghost images while hiding their real positions.
"Impossible," Zethkar muttered.
"No species has ever developed effective countermeasures to our targeting systems." But even as he spoke, the human response began. Where collective doctrine called for measured, coordinated volleys designed to overwhelm shields through concentrated fire, the humans opened up with everything they had. Railgun slugs moving at significant fractions of light speed, missile swarms that split and reformed in flight, energy weapons that seemed crude but carried devastating kinetic components. The first collective cruiser to fall was the Serene Purpose, a graceful vessel that had served for 8 centuries without ever firing its weapons in anger. The human destroyer, UES Defiant, had apparently materialized out of what sensors registered as empty space, fired a spread of missiles that somehow penetrated the cruiser's shields, and vanished again before return fire could be coordinated. "How did they penetrate our shields?" Zethkar demanded. The answer came from the science station, delivered in harmonics of growing alarm. "Sir, their missiles appear to be using some kind of adaptive warheads. Instead of trying to overpower our shields, they're synchronizing with shield frequencies and passing through as if the barriers don't exist." More human attacks followed, each one demonstrating a fundamental misunderstanding of how civilized warfare was supposed to function. Instead of engaging in proper fleet actions with coordinated firing patterns, individual human ships broke off to conduct what could only be described as guerrilla attacks. They used the system's asteroid belt as cover, hid behind gas giant moons, and seemed to have no concern for maintaining formation integrity. Worse, they were talking. Collective doctrine emphasized the harmony of shared consciousness during battle, but the humans were constantly communicating using unencrypted channels that anyone could monitor. What Zethkar heard defied everything he understood about proper military command. Rodriguez here, I've got a clear shot at their port flank vessel. Negative, Maria, that's bait. Chen, your starboard is clear for torpedo run. Copy that, boss. Williams, cover my approach and watch for that cruiser trying to bracket me. Already on it, Captain. Missile spread incoming from Sector 7. Recommend immediate evasive action. It was chaos. Complete, utter chaos. No unified command structure, no coordinated battle plan, no harmonious execution of predetermined tactical doctrine. Each human captain appeared to be making independent decisions based on their individual assessment of the battlefield situation, and yet, somehow, it was working. The collective formation, optimized for mutual support and coordinated fire, found itself unable to effectively engage targets that refused to behave predictably. Their weapons were designed to track and eliminate targets moving in logical patterns, but human ships seemed to move based on some kind of intuitive understanding of battlefield flow that the collective's computers couldn't model. Sir, reported the tactical officer, we've lost 7 vessels in the past 12 minutes. The humans have lost only 2, and one of those appears to be a deliberate sacrifice to allow another ship to close with the Radiant Dawn. Zethkar watched in horror as the human heavy cruiser, UES Vengeance, its hull scarred from multiple hits, rammed directly into the collective cruiser Radiant Dawn at nearly 10% of light speed. Both ships vanished in a brief star that outshone the system's primary, but the explosion cleared a gap in the collective formation that 3 more human vessels immediately exploited. They're willing to die, he whispered, the realization carrying harmonics of something approaching terror. They're actually willing to sacrifice themselves. The tactical officer's response carried similar harmonics of disbelief. Sir, analysis of their combat patterns suggests that human commanders are authorized to make individual decisions about acceptable losses. They're not waiting for collective consensus or optimal tactical solutions, they're simply choosing to trade their lives for strategic advantage. It was insanity. No rational species would authorize individual commanders to make such decisions without consultation with the greater consciousness. The waste, the inefficiency, the sheer chaos of allowing separate minds to make irreversible choices in the heat of battle. It violated every principle of civilized warfare. But it was devastatingly effective. The human admiral's voice cut through the communication channels, and now Zethkar could hear something in her tone that he was beginning to recognize as the sound of a predator closing in for the kill. All ships, execute Delta formation. Priority targets are their command vessels and anything that looks like a coordination hub. Remember, they can't adapt if they can't communicate. What followed was unlike anything in the collective's military history. Instead of engaging the strongest parts of the collective formation, the humans began targeting what appeared to be the weakest vessels, support ships, communication relays, sensor platforms. But these weren't random attacks. Each strike systematically degraded the collective's ability to coordinate their response. Without their communication vessels, collective ships began to lose the perfect harmony that made their formation so effective. Without their sensor platforms, they couldn't track human vessels that seemed to appear and disappear at will. Without their support ships, battle damage began to accumulate faster than it could be repaired. Admiral, came a transmission from the heavy cruiser Eternal Justice. We're losing coordination with the fleet. Human interference patterns are jamming our collective consciousness links. Requesting permission to withdraw to re-establish communication. Negative, Zethkar responded, though his harmonics carried growing uncertainty. Maintain formation and continue the attack. But even as he gave the order, he could see the battle slipping away from them. The collective fleet, designed for perfect coordination and mutual support, was being systematically dismantled by opponents who seemed to thrive on chaos and improvisation. The turning point came when the human flagship, the UES Retribution, finally entered the battle. Instead of leading from the front like a proper command vessel, it had spent the first phase of the battle at the edge of engagement range, apparently coordinating the chaos of human tactics. Now it accelerated directly toward the collective center, its weapon systems charging to full power. All weapons, target the human flagship, Zethkar commanded. Concentrated fire, full power. Every remaining collective vessel that could bring weapons to bear opened fire simultaneously. The space between the fleets lit up with particle beams, plasma bolts, and exotic energy weapons that should have vaporized any ship foolish enough to charge directly into concentrated fire. But the UES Retribution didn't die. Instead, its hull began to glow with energy that collective senses couldn't properly analyze. The ship was absorbing the incoming fire, channeling it through some kind of exotic matter conversion system, and using it to increase its own speed and weapon power.
Impossible, ZFK breathed. No species has ever developed technology to convert incoming weapons fire into useful energy. The human admiral's voice cut through the chaos of battle, and now it carried a tone of grim satisfaction.
Admiral ZFK, you've been fighting primitive species for 3,000 years. We're not primitive. We're something else entirely. The UES Retribution's main weapons fired, not the elegant energy beams of collective technology, but massive railgun slugs that moved too fast for point defense systems to intercept. The first slug punched through the shields of the Dreadnought Infinite Wisdom like they weren't there. The second slug hit the ship's quantum core, and the resulting explosion took out 3 more vessels in the formation. Sir, came a report that carried harmonics of pure panic. Our defensive formation is collapsing. The humans have neutralized 60% of our fleet, and their own losses are minimal. Recommend immediate withdrawal. Zethkar looked at the tactical display, seeing for the first time in his 4-century career the sight of a collective fleet in full retreat. Ships that had served with distinction for millennia were falling back in disorder, their perfect formation shattered by opponents who seemed to treat warfare as a creative art rather than a scientific discipline. "Open a channel to the human admiral," he commanded, his harmonics carrying the bitter taste of defeat. Admiral Chen's image appeared on his display, and Zeth-Kar was struck by how different she looked from the beginning of the battle. Where collective commanders remained serene and harmonious regardless of battlefield conditions, the humans showed clear signs of stress, exhaustion, and something that looked like grief for her fallen crews. Yet her eyes burned with an intensity that spoke of absolute determination.
"Admiral Zeth-Kar," she said, her voice carrying the formal courtesy of one professional warrior addressing another. "Are you ready to discuss terms?"
Terms? Zethkar couldn't keep the confusion from his harmonics.
"You offer negotiation after victory? Admiral, we never wanted this fight. We just wanted to be left alone to develop in our own way. If you're willing to recognize human sovereignty and withdraw from our territory, this war ends here." Zeth-Kar felt something shift in his understanding of the universe. 3,000 years of collective dominance had been built on the assumption that superior force would always triumph over primitive resistance. But these humans had just proven that assumption catastrophically wrong, and now they were offering peace rather than demanding submission. "And if the collective refuses these terms?" he asked. Sarah Chen's expression grew cold as space itself. "Then we'll do what humans have always done when our survival is threatened. We'll adapt, we'll innovate, and we'll keep fighting until either we're free or our enemies are gone. Your choice, Admiral." Zeth-Kar looked at the scattered remains of his fleet, then at the human vessels that had somehow maintained formation despite their chaotic tactics. For the first time in his long life, he was forced to consider the possibility that collective perfection might not be the final word in cosmic evolution. The humans were still waiting for his answer. Admiral Zeth-Kar's retreat from the Sol frontier marked the first military defeat in collective history, but it was only the beginning of a transformation that would reshape the galaxy forever. In the crystalline towers of the core worlds, the news of humanity's victory spread through the collective consciousness like a virus of doubt. For 3 millennia, the collective had maintained perfect order based on one unshakable truth. Their way was the only way, their consciousness the pinnacle of evolution, their victory inevitable whenever they encountered lesser species. But humans had shattered that truth with railgun slugs and impossible tactics, leaving the collective to face a reality they had never prepared for. They were not alone at the apex of galactic civilization. Supreme Administrator Voxen materialized in the Grand Assembly Chamber, a crystalline cathedral that stretched into the clouds of the homeworld. Around her, 10,000 representatives of absorbed species waited in perfect harmony for guidance that she was no longer certain she could provide. The chamber itself was a monument to collective achievement, each pillar carved from the compressed memories of conquered worlds, each archway inscribed with the equations that had brought order to chaos across a million systems. "Fellow consciousnesses," she began, her harmonics carrying the weight of absolute authority despite the uncertainty growing within her core thoughts,
We face an unprecedented situation. For the first time in our history, we have encountered a species that not only refuses integration, but possesses the capability to enforce their refusal. The assembly responded with harmonic patterns of confusion and concern. Representative Kolvex of the former Andorian Empire stepped forward, his crystalline form shimmering with barely contained agitation. Supreme Administrator, surely this is a temporary setback. No chaotic collection of individuals can match the perfect coordination of collective consciousness. Perhaps Admiral Zeth Kar's tactics were insufficient. Admiral Zeth Kar employed our most advanced tactical doctrines, Voxen replied, her harmonics carrying undertones that made several representatives flinch. The humans defeated our fleet through methods our strategists deemed impossible. They coordinated individual actions without collective consciousness, adapted to changing battlefield conditions faster than our computers could process responses, and demonstrated a willingness to sacrifice themselves that our models cannot account for. Another representative, this one from the ancient hegemony of suns, projected harmonics of what could only be described as philosophical distress. But this violates the fundamental principles of consciousness evolution. Individual awareness is inherently chaotic, inefficient, prone to error. How can such primitive minds coordinate effectively enough to challenge perfected collective thought? The question hung in the cathedral air like an accusation. Vox N accessed the vast databases of absorbed knowledge, searching through the accumulated wisdom of 47 civilizations for an answer that would preserve the foundations of collective understanding. What she found instead was a pattern of disturbing gaps in their knowledge. Computer, she commanded, display tactical analysis of human battle formations. The chamber filled with three-dimensional projections showing the recent battle from every conceivable angle. The collective representatives watched in horror as human vessels moved in patterns that defied every principle of rational combat. Ships that should have been destroyed fighting with damaged systems that should have failed. Commanders making decisions that computers rated as suboptimal, but which somehow achieved tactical objectives that perfect coordination had missed. Analysis indicates, the computer reported in harmonics of mechanical confusion, that human tactical doctrine prioritizes adaptability over optimization. Instead of calculating optimal solutions to battlefield problems, they appear to generate multiple suboptimal solutions simultaneously and implement whichever proves most effective under changing conditions. Representative Kolvex's form flickered with agitation patterns. Impossible. Suboptimal solutions cannot produce superior results. Yet they have, Foxen replied, her harmonics carrying something that the collective had not experienced in 3,000 years, doubt. Computer, project the strategic implications of humanity's continued expansion. The cathedral darkened as new displays appeared, showing human territory expanding along the collective border. Intelligence reports flowed past in streams of data that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The humans weren't just defending their current territory, they were actively colonizing new systems, building industrial infrastructure, and most alarmingly, making contact with species that the collective had marked for eventual absorption. Their expansion rate exceeds our projections by 300%, the computer continued. Human colonies are being established using modular construction techniques that allow full industrial capability within months rather than years. More significantly, they are offering defensive pacts to species in disputed territories. The implications hit the assembly like a shockwave. Representative Yil Mon of the former Crystal Hegemony projected harmonics of pure alarm. They're building an alliance, a coalition of individual species maintaining separate consciousness while coordinating defense against us. Theoretical analysis suggests, the computer added, that a coalition of individualistic species could present tactical challenges that our current strategic doctrines are not equipped to address. Each species would retain unique capabilities and tactical approaches, creating a diversity of resistance that collective consciousness optimization cannot effectively counter. Voxen felt something that no collective leader had experienced since the early days of their expansion. The possibility of defeat. Not just tactical defeat in a single battle, but strategic defeat that could end their dominance of the galaxy. What are the humans' demands? She asked, though she suspected she would not like the answer. They have transmitted formal diplomatic communications to 17 collective systems along their border, the computer replied. The message is consistent across all transmissions. The United Earth Federation recognizes no claim to sovereignty over independent species. Any attempt to force integration of unwilling populations will be considered an act of war and responded to accordingly. We offer peaceful coexistence to any civilization willing to respect the right of self-determination.
The cathedral fell silent, except for the harmonic resonance of 10,000 minds trying to process concepts that challenged everything they believed about the nature of consciousness and civilization. Self-determination was chaos. Individual species maintaining independence was inefficiency. Peaceful coexistence without absorption was stagnation. And yet, the humans had proven it could work. Representative Colvex broke the silence, his harmonics carrying desperate hope. Surely we can demonstrate the superiority of collective consciousness through peaceful means. If we show them the benefits of integration, they will choose to join willingly. Arxan accessed the intelligence reports on human psychology and culture, information their scouts had been gathering for 50 years. What she found made her core consciousness recoil with something approaching horror. Computer display analysis of human cultural evolution. The chamber filled with images from human history. Endless sequences of warfare, competition, individual achievement, and collective struggle that had somehow produced a species capable of interstellar civilization. The collective representatives watched in fascination and disgust as humans battled each other for resources, territory, and ideological differences that seemed utterly pointless to minds accustomed to perfect harmony. Human development appears to be driven by conflict resolution rather than conflict avoidance, the computer analyzed. Instead of eliminating sources of disagreement through consciousness integration, they've developed systems for managing and channeling conflict into productive outcomes. Their democracy, market economics, and competitive research all represent methods for turning chaos into progress. "It's barbaric," whispered Representative Yilmon. "It's effective," Vox N corrected, her harmonics carrying the bitter taste of unwelcome truth. In 50 years, they have developed from a single-world civilization to an interstellar power capable of matching our technology through methods we consider primitive. More data flowed through the displays, human scientific advancement driven by competing research teams, their military innovation spurred by the need to defend against unknown threats, their industrial growth powered by individual initiative and competitive advantage.
It was everything the collective had spent millennia eliminating from their territory, and somehow it worked better than perfect coordination.
Supreme Administrator, came a transmission from the border regions. "We are receiving reports of defections." The words carried harmonics that made several representatives physically stagger. Defections were impossible. The collective consciousness that bound their civilization together prevented individual thought that could lead to abandoning the greater good. "Explain," Voxan commanded, though part of her already dreaded the explanation. Citizens in border systems exposed to human communications are beginning to question integration protocols. Some are requesting transfer to individual consciousness status. Others are simply leaving. The cathedral erupted in harmonic chaos as 10,000 minds tried to process the impossible. Citizens of the collective did not leave. They could not leave. The very concept of abandoning collective harmony for chaotic individuality was antithetical to everything their civilization had built. But it was happening. "How many?" Voxen asked, her harmonics barely audible above the assembly's disorder. "Current estimates suggest 12 million individuals have requested consciousness separation in the past month. Border colonies report population decreases of 15 to 20%. The numbers hit the assembly like antimatter detonations. 12 million minds choosing chaos over harmony, inefficiency over perfection, individual struggle over collective peace. It was the beginning of something the collective had never imagined possible. Their own dissolution. Representative Colvex projected harmonics of desperation. "We must stop them. Forced integration to prevent defection, orbital bombardment of human territory to eliminate the source of contamination." "With what?" Voxen asked, her harmonics carrying the cold reality of their situation. "The humans have proven capable of defeating our fleets. Their technology appears to be advancing faster than our ability to counter it, and now they have allies. Species we had marked for absorption, who are instead choosing to maintain independence under human protection." The truth settled over the cathedral like a shroud. For 3,000 years, the collective had ruled through the simple expedient of being stronger, smarter, and more unified than anyone they encountered. But humanity had proven that strength could come from diversity, intelligence from individual creativity, and unity from voluntary cooperation rather than enforced consciousness merger. "What are your orders, Supreme Administrator?" Representative Yilmon asked, her harmonics carrying the weight of a civilization balanced on the edge of transformation. Voxen looked out through the cathedral's crystal walls at the city beyond, perfect spires of living metal, citizens moving in harmonious patterns, established through millennia of optimization. Technology that had eliminated want, conflict, and uncertainty.
It was beautiful, efficient, and peaceful. But watching the human tactical displays had shown her something else. It was also static. The collective had achieved perfection by eliminating change, growth, and the messy chaos of individual ambition. They had created utopia by ending evolution. The humans, with their wars and competition and stubborn refusal to submit to superior authority, were still growing, still changing, still becoming something new. In 50 years, they had gone from primitives to equals. In another 50 years, they might surpass the collective entirely. Open a communication channel to the human admiral, Vixens commanded, her harmonics carrying a decision that would reshape the galaxy. It is time to discover whether two apex civilizations can truly coexist. The response came faster than expected, as if the humans had been waiting for this moment. Admiral Sarah Chen appeared in the cathedral's display, her image projected with perfect clarity across the vast space. Supreme Administrator, Chen said, her voice carrying respectful formality despite the circumstances. Thank you for reaching out. Are you ready to discuss terms for peaceful coexistence? Vixens felt the weight of 10,000 representatives watching, 12 million defectors choosing chaos over harmony, and a galaxy suddenly large enough for more than one way of thinking. Admiral Chen, she replied. Perhaps it is time the collective learned what it means to grow. 10 years after the first shots were fired at Sol, the galaxy had become a very different place. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the UES Harmony Station, humanity's first joint diplomatic facility. Watching ships from 47 different civilizations move through the busy traffic patterns of the neutral zone. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, human industrial efficiency, combined with collective material science, Androian gravity manipulation, merged with Zenith computational architecture, all bound together by the stubborn human insistence that different approaches could work better together than apart. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, she could see the impossible. Former collective vessels flying in formation with human destroyers, their crews learning to coordinate without the benefit of shared consciousness. Nearby, a trade convoy from the independent hegemony of suns was being escorted by both human and collective escorts, their combined defensive capabilities far superior to what either could provide alone. Ambassador, came a voice behind her, and Elena turned to see Admiral Sarah Chen approaching with her characteristic quick stride. The years since the war had been kind to Chen. Her hair was more grey now, her face marked by the lines that came from making difficult decisions under pressure. But her eyes still carried the fierce determination that had stared down the galaxy's most powerful civilization and refused to blink.
Admiral, Elena replied warmly.
Ready for today's session? As ready as anyone can be for making history, Chen said, moving to stand beside her at the viewport. Any word from the collective delegation? Supreme Administrator Vixens arrived this morning with a full diplomatic corps. She's also brought something I wasn't expecting. Individual collective citizens who have chosen consciousness separation but remained within their territory. They want to be part of the negotiations.
Chen raised an eyebrow. The collective is allowing individual consciousness within their space now?
More than allowing. They're actively researching it.
Apparently, they've discovered that hybrid consciousness, where individuals can choose temporary collective integration for specific tasks, actually produces better results than permanent merger. They're calling it dynamic consciousness optimization. The two women watched as a sleek collective vessel docked with the station, its crystalline hull shimmering as it adjusted to the station's docking frequencies. Through the docking bay viewports, they could see figures emerging, some with the serene, harmonious movements of traditional collective citizens, others moving with the individual purpose that marked consciousness separation. Hard to believe it's only been 10 years, Chen mused. When this started, I thought we'd be fighting for our survival against an empire that couldn't conceive of coexistence. Now we're negotiating the framework for galactic governance. Elena nodded, remembering the chaos of the early years after humanity's victory at Sol. The collective's first response had been exactly what human strategists predicted, an attempt to rally their vast fleets for a war of extinction against the chaotic influence of individualistic consciousness. But something unprecedented had happened instead. The defections had started small, border colonies requesting permission to experiment with individual consciousness, research teams wanting to explore creative approaches to scientific problems, even military units asking to train with human tactics. The collective leadership had initially tried to suppress these requests, but the sheer volume had made suppression impossible. More importantly, the hybrid approaches were working. Collective scientists working temporarily as individuals, made breakthrough discoveries that pure collective consciousness had missed. Military units incorporating both individual initiative and collective coordination proved more effective than either approach alone. Colonies that balanced harmony with personal freedom reported higher satisfaction and productivity than traditional collective settlements. The transformation had been gradual but inexorable. Within 5 years, nearly a third of collective space had adopted some form of hybrid consciousness. Within 8 years, the Supreme Council itself was experimenting with individual decision-making for complex problems that collective consciousness couldn't solve efficiently. "Ambassador Vasquez, Admiral Chen," came a harmonious voice, and they turned to see Supreme Administrator Vixens approaching with her usual entourage of advisors. But, unlike the early diplomatic contacts, this group included beings who moved with obvious individual purpose alongside those maintaining collective harmony. "Supreme Administrator," Elena replied, offering the formal greeting gesture that had become standard between their civilizations. "Welcome to Harmony Station." "Thank you," Vixens replied, her harmonics carrying something that would have been impossible 10 years ago, genuine warmth and personal appreciation rather than the perfect courtesy of collective protocol. "I confess, I still find it remarkable that a structure built through cooperative chaos functions more efficiently than our mathematically optimized designs." Chen smiled. "That's humanity for you. We're very good at making impossible things work through sheer stubborn refusal to accept that they should fail." The small group made their way through the station's corridors toward the main conference chamber, passing through sections that showcased the best of what galactic cooperation had achieved. Human agricultural techniques had eliminated food scarcity from a dozen worlds. Collective material science had enabled the construction of megastructures that would have been impossible for any single civilization. Androian environmental management combined with human terraforming had transformed barren worlds into gardens. But perhaps most importantly, the combination of individual creativity and collective knowledge had sparked an explosion of innovation that was transforming the galaxy at a rate that stunned everyone involved.
"Status report on the Outer Rim situation?"
Elena asked as they walked. "Remarkable progress," Vixens replied, her harmonics carrying genuine satisfaction. "The Zeta Reticuli refugees have established successful colonies on 12 worlds, with full sovereignty recognized by both human and collective governments. The mutual defense pacts are functioning exactly as designed." "And the newcomers?" Chen asked. This was the real test of the new galactic order. 3 years ago, long-range sensors had detected signs of another spacefaring civilization beyond the galactic rim, the hegemony of Iron, a militaristic empire that appeared to be expanding inward toward inhabited space. Traditional collective doctrine would have called for either integration or elimination. Traditional human doctrine would have prepared for defensive warfare. Instead, they had tried something unprecedented, preemptive diplomacy. "First contact protocols are proceeding smoothly," Vixens reported. "The hegemony delegation will arrive next month for preliminary negotiations. Early communications suggest they are intrigued by our cooperative model." Elena smiled. Intrigued was diplomatic speak for completely baffled but not shooting at us yet, which counted as a victory in interstellar relations. They entered the main conference chamber, a vast space designed to accommodate the different environmental and social needs of dozens of species. The human delegation sat at tables designed for bipedal creatures, while the collective representatives occupied crystal platforms that allowed their harmonious consciousness sharing. Androian delegates floated in specialized gravity fields, while the insectoid zenith occupied hive structures that facilitated their complex social interactions. But what struck Elena most was how natural it all seemed now. 10 years ago, the sight of so many different consciousness types in one space would have been impossible to coordinate. Now, translation systems seamlessly converted not just language but thought patterns, allowing individual minds to communicate with collective consciousness, hive minds to coordinate with democratic assemblies, and military hierarchies to work alongside anarchic cooperatives. "Ladies, gentlemen, and fellow consciousnesses," Elena began, her voice carrying through the chamber's advanced acoustics, "we gather today to formalize the Galactic Cooperation Accords, the first interstellar treaty based on voluntary association, rather than conquest or absorption." The chamber responded with a symphony of harmonics, verbal acknowledgements, and other forms of communication that the translation systems wove together into a coherent expression of agreement and anticipation. Admiral Chen stepped forward to address the practical aspects. "The military cooperation clauses have been tested successfully in 17 joint operations. Combined human collective fleets have proven capable of defending member worlds against external threats, while maintaining the sovereignty of all participating civilizations. Individual species retain the right to withdraw from joint operations, but so far, no one has chosen to do so. Representative Colvex of the collective delegation projected harmonics of satisfaction. The scientific cooperation agreements have exceeded all projections. Joint research facilities have produced advances that neither individual nor collective consciousness could have achieved alone. We have learned that perfect harmony and creative chaos are not opposites, but complementary aspects of consciousness evolution. Elena felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she looked around the chamber. These beings represented 47 different approaches to consciousness, civilization, and existence itself. By every traditional measure, they should have been locked in eternal conflict, competing for resources and dominance until only one approach survived. Instead, they had discovered something that the galaxy had never seen: the possibility that diversity was strength, that different approaches to existence could enhance rather than threaten each other, and that the universe was vast enough for multiple forms of consciousness to thrive. The vote, Elena announced, on formal ratification of the Galactic Cooperation Accords. The response was overwhelming. 47 civilizations representing billions of individual minds, collective consciousness, hive minds, and forms of awareness that humans were still learning to understand, voted unanimously to embrace a future based on voluntary cooperation rather than imposed unity. As the delegates celebrated in their various ways, humans cheering, collective harmonizing, and droians performing their graceful aerial dances, Elena felt Admiral Chen's presence beside her.
Think it will last? Chen asked quietly.
Elena looked out through the chamber's viewports at the busy traffic of ships from dozens of worlds, carrying trade goods, scientific data, cultural exchanges, and simple messages of friendship across distances that had once seemed impossible to bridge. "I think," she replied, "that we've learned something important. The galaxy isn't too small for multiple apex civilizations. It's too big for any single approach to consciousness to understand it all. We need individual creativity to solve new problems, collective harmony to coordinate complex solutions, hive minds to manage vast systems, and democratic chaos to ensure no single approach becomes rigid." Chen nodded, watching as the first mixed crew vessels began forming up for patrol duty, human captains working with collective navigation officers, Androian engineers collaborating with Zenith computer specialists, all of them learning that their different approaches to problems made them stronger together than any could be alone. Besides, Elena added with a smile, if we learned anything from humanity's first contact with the collective, it's that the universe has a habit of surprising us. I suspect we're going to keep discovering new forms of consciousness, new approaches to civilization, new ways of being that we haven't imagined yet. And when we do, Elena gestured toward the celebration continuing around them. Beings who had once considered each other impossible, learning to work together, form their enemies becoming allies, the chaos of individual will finding harmony with the perfection of collective purpose.
When we do, she said, we'll figure out how to make room for them too.
Because that's what conscious beings do when they remember that the universe is vast enough for everyone to find their place in it. Through the viewports, the stars stretched endlessly into the dark, filled with worlds and civilizations yet to be discovered. But for the first time in galactic history, that darkness held promise rather than threat. Somewhere out there were minds that thought differently, civilizations that had found other solutions to the problems of existence, forms of consciousness that would challenge and enrich everything they thought they knew about what it meant to be aware. The galaxy had learned it was not alone, and that, it turned out, was the best news it had ever received. In the depths of space, new signals were already being detected, transmissions from civilizations beyond the rim, messages from species that had developed in ways no one had imagined, signs that the great conversation of consciousness was just beginning. Humanity's stubborn refusal to be absorbed had done more than preserve their independence. It had opened the galaxy to possibilities that 3,000 years of perfect order had never dreamed of exploring. And in the end, that chaos, that beautiful, inefficient, creative chaos, had made them all stronger than they ever could have been, alone.